The counterattack from the Great Thousand Worlds against the Demon Domain had already been ongoing for a full 3.5 years. During this time, the Great Thousand Worlds Alliance's forces had destroyed 8 of the 32 major clans and dozens of smaller ones. Overall, the results were considerable, having weakened nearly a quarter of the strength of the extraterritorial evil clans. However, despite these achievements, neither the Flame Emperor nor the Martial Ancestor felt any joy. As time passed, their expressions grew ever more somber. In these 3.5 years, they had yet to find any trace of the heavenly evil god. But there was an overwhelming sense of pressure building in the air, an ominous feeling that the heavenly evil god was rapidly recovering his strength somewhere, unknown to them. One could imagine that when he reached the Nine Eyes state, the extraterritorial evil clans, currently lying in wait, would launch a brutal counterattack on the Great Thousand Worlds, reclaiming 1,000-fold the losses they had suffered over these 3 years. At that time, the entire Great Thousand Worlds would be engulfed in a storm of blood and carnage. In the Demon Domain, on a somewhat desolate continent, spiritual light shimmered in the air, and countless ethereal figures moved about, breathing life into this otherwise barren land. These figures were, of course, the forces of the Great Thousand Worlds Alliance. The Flame Emperor and the Martial Ancestor stood atop the highest peak of this continent, their eyes slightly closed. Their spiritual senses spread like lightning across the boundless void, probing lower dimensions where unusual fluctuations were detected. They searched for half a day, but once again, there was no result. It seemed the extraterritorial evil clans had retreated further away. As they prepared to withdraw their senses, both felt a sudden stirring in their hearts and quickly locked onto a specific point in the void. In that brief moment, they felt a familiar fluctuation emanating from there. It was the heavenly evil god. Finally found you. Even with their composure, the Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor couldn't help but feel a stir in their hearts. Then, with a thought, their senses surged with immense power, tearing open the space at that node. A vast, dark rift appeared in the void, and 2 immense torrents of spiritual energy came crashing down from the sky, carrying the will of the Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor. At their level, even if their true bodies were far away, they could quickly channel their spiritual energy wherever their senses reached. The 2 powerful streams of spiritual energy rushed into the dark space, where they quickly locked onto a grand palace floating in the shadows. Outside the palace, they saw the gloomy figure of the sacred heavenly demon emperor. However, neither the Flame Emperor nor the Martial Ancestor paid him any mind. Their focus was entirely on the deepest part of the space, where dark energy swirled and a terrifying annihilation pulse seemed to be brewing. Heavenly evil god! A thunderous roar erupted from the 2 torrents of spiritual energy, and they shot toward the depths of the darkness. The darkness was violently torn apart, revealing a demonic figure sitting cross-legged in the void, undoubtedly the form of the heavenly evil god. He sensed the incoming attack and slowly opened his tightly shut eyes. His eyes radiated darkness, devouring any light that dared approach. You 2 are truly troublesome. The heavenly evil god glanced indifferently at the 2 vast streams of spiritual energy descending from the heavens. A mocking smile slowly tugged at the corner of his mouth. But you're too late. As his words fell, not only did his eyes and the 3rd eye on his forehead open, but also the 3 evil eyes in his palms and heart all snapped open. The 8 evil eyes. With the opening of all 8 eyes, boundless demonic aura immediately flooded the world, rising like countless columns of smoke, before finally converging into a massive black demon wheel several tens of thousands of feet wide. As the wheel passed, it seemed as though the very heavens and earth were being torn asunder. Boom! The demon wheel collided with the 2 torrents of spiritual energy, causing the very ground to shake. The entire lower dimension trembled as if on the verge of collapsing. You think these 2 streams of spiritual energy can deal with me in my 8-eye state? How naive. The heavenly evil god's mocking laughter echoed, and the demon wheel suddenly accelerated. The lower dimension was torn apart by the magic light, while the 2 spiritual torrents rapidly disintegrated in that instant. The demon wheel shattered 2 waves of spiritual energy, but it did not dissipate. Instead, it pursued the faintest trace of its target, tearing through the void before vanishing from sight. On that continent, both the Flame Emperor and the Martial Ancestor simultaneously opened their eyes. Their expressions darkened slightly before they looked up, only to see the void being torn open. A massive demon wheel, tens of thousands of feet in size, came roaring down, as though it aimed to cleave the continent in half. This sudden and terrifying offensive immediately drew the attention of the Great Thousand Worlds Alliance's forces stationed on the continent. They were filled with shock and fear, clearly sensing the terrifying power contained within the demon wheel. The Flame Emperor's face grew cold as he formed a hand seal. His sleeve billowed, and suddenly, the blazing imperial flame surged forth, transforming into a giant dragon that roared as it collided with the demon wheel. Boom! The two forces clashed. The flame dragon was torn apart, but the demon wheel was also scorched, its demonic aura fading and weakening. The martial ancestor threw a distant punch. As the punch surged through the air, the surrounding space shattered, and the punch struck the dim demon wheel, shattering it into countless black fragments. Not bad, not bad. You two have made progress these years, but now is not the best time for us to meet. Wait a little longer, and once my ninth eye recovers, I'll engage with you properly. Haha. Over these years, you've killed many of my extraterritorial evil clan. When the time comes, I'll kill back 100-fold. The demon wheel shattered, but the sharp laughter of the heavenly evil god echoed through the heavens and earth. Across the continent, all the great Thousand Worlds experts looked grim, their eyes filled with fear and anger. On the mountaintop, the Flame Emperor and martial ancestor exchanged a glance. They both saw the heavy burden in each other's eyes. In their brief encounter earlier, they had sensed the rapid growth of the heavenly evil god's power. If in the past they could maintain an upper hand by working together, and perhaps even find a weakness to suppress the heavenly evil god if the timing was right, this time, even with their combined strength, they couldn't gain the slightest advantage. These years, they hadn't relaxed. Their strength had improved as well, but it was clear that the heavenly evil god had grown even faster. Swish. Chen, the azure-robed sword saint, the true dragon emperor, and many other saint-grade experts appeared behind the Flame Emperor and martial ancestor. They too wore serious expressions as they asked, Flame Emperor, martial ancestor, have you found the heavenly evil god's whereabouts? The Flame Emperor and martial ancestor nodded slightly. We detected him earlier, but by now, the heavenly evil god has likely moved again. This demon is too cautious. It seems he doesn't plan to face us directly until he has fully recovered to his peak. According to what the heavenly evil god said earlier, he has already restored his 8 eyes, Chen said with a grim expression. The Flame Emperor and martial ancestor both sighed lightly. What should we do now? Should we continue searching? Asked the true dragon emperor in a deep voice. The Flame Emperor and martial ancestor shook their heads. Prepare to withdraw. After 3 years of counteroffensive, the army is weary. The heavenly evil god's recovery cannot be stopped, and at this point, we can only wait for the right moment to strike. Moreover, given the heavenly evil god's current strength, even if they did find him, they wouldn't be able to pose a threat. It was likely that they would be entangled in battle, and the Great Thousand Worlds Alliance's forces would be struck back by the extraterritorial evil clan. The others fell silent. Despite 3 years of counteroffensive, cutting down some of the extraterritorial evil clan's forces, they hadn't achieved their ultimate goal. The heavenly evil god was only one step away from his 9th eye. They were powerless, left with no choice but to wait for that day to come. You all don't need to worry, the Flame Emperor said with a smile, trying to reassure everyone. The Undying Elder sent word that Chen has reached the 3 divine realms and is currently cultivating the Boundless Radiance body and the Tailing Ancient body. If successful, he could become the 3rd-ranked one. With the combined strength of the 3 of us, we might stand a chance against the 9-eyed heavenly evil god. Upon hearing this, the others' expressions softened a little, and a glimmer of hope appeared in their eyes. Order the retreat, the Flame Emperor commanded. Everyone cupped their fists in response, then vanished in a flash of light. Soon, the continent was in turmoil, with countless spiritual lights flashing as the army began preparing to withdraw from the demon domain. The Flame Emperor and martial ancestor stood on the mountaintop, watching the countless spiritual figures below. They couldn't help but sigh lightly, their expressions growing solemn. They knew that the fate of the Great Thousand Worlds would soon be decided. If something went wrong, it was likely that countless lives across the Great Thousand Worlds would be turned to souls. Now, we can only hope that Chen succeeds. The Great Thousand Worlds Alliance army, after nearly 4 years of expedition, finally returned to the Great Thousand Worlds. However, upon their return, they did not hide the truth but instead disclosed all the information openly. Although the army had weakened the strength of the extraterritorial evil clan, it had not stopped the heavenly evil god from recovering his power. In the near future, once the heavenly evil god regains his peak, the extraterritorial evil clan will surely return with renewed force. The news spread, triggering unrest. Many of the beings and factions in the Great Thousand Worlds were filled with anxiety. After all, The terror brought by the heavenly evil god was overwhelming. In order to stabilize the people's hearts, the Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor stationed the Alliance's army at the border between the Great Thousand Worlds and the Demon Domain, forming an extensive defensive line. Staying vigilant and prepared for a possible frenzied counterattack from the extraterritorial evil clan. Under this state of alert, half a year passed in the blink of an eye. The uneasy atmosphere in the Great Thousand Worlds, under the guidance of figures like the Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor, did not spiral out of control. Instead, many factions started to shift from anxiety to anger. This anger was naturally directed at the extraterritorial evil clan. Since you wish to destroy our world, the very one on which we depend for survival, then if death is inevitable, we might as well perish together with you. With this surge of anger, the number of breakthroughs among the powerful in the Great Thousand Worlds began to multiply, especially among those at the peak of Earth Supreme. They abandoned the barriers in their hearts and began to make desperate attempts to break through to the Heavenly Supreme. While some failed, there were also successes, which boosted the overall strength of the Great Thousand Worlds. In this atmosphere, the beings of the Great Thousand Worlds no longer felt uneasy. Instead, they grew impatient with the waiting and began to look forward to the appearance of the extraterritorial evil clan. After all, waiting for destruction was unbearable. They would rather fight to the death in a decisive battle. Under this growing anticipation for war, half a year passed quietly. At the border of the Great Thousand Worlds, on the northwest defense line, in a vast mountain range, 5 figures stood atop a mountain peak, their sharp, hawk-like gazes scanning the surroundings. This was a reconnaissance squad, with 4 members at the lower Earth Supreme level and 1 at the peak of Earth Supreme. Their mission was to monitor this region at all times. "Captain, we've been patrolling here for 2 months." One of the lower Earth Supremes stretched lazily and gazed aimlessly into the distance. The entire world seemed devoid of any disturbance, making the task incredibly dull. "Tired of the peace?" The squad leader, a peak Earth Supreme, glanced at him and said lightly, "Don't worry, it won't be long before you'll wish for this peace again. Once the extraterritorial evil clan arrives, it will signal a bloodbath across the Great Thousand Worlds." The other squad members fell silent, their expressions darkening. Just a few years ago, with their strength, they could have easily been rulers of their own territories, striking fear into others. Now, however, they were forced to form a small squad, guarding the front line of the Great Thousand Worlds. They all understood this was an unavoidable responsibility. If everyone thought of running away, the Great Thousand Worlds would certainly face destruction, and their families and friends would be slaughtered. "Captain, do you think we can defeat the extraterritorial evil clan? I've heard that the heavenly evil god, once he recovers, will be at his peak and extremely terrifying," one of the squad members asked in a low voice. The captain fell silent for a moment and then said, "According to the information I've received, if the heavenly evil god regains his peak, even with the Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor working together, they may not be his match." The 4 squad members were shocked, their faces darkening. The Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor were nearly the leaders of the entire Great Thousand Worlds, and it was only because of their strength that the Great Thousand Worlds had the courage to resist the extraterritorial evil clan. Yet now, even the captain was saying that the Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor might not be able to stand up to the heavenly evil god at his peak? Seeing their suppressed expressions, the captain suddenly smiled and said, "But don't be too despairing. I have another piece of news. There is someone in our Great Thousand Worlds who is currently making a full-force push to break through. If successful, we will have 3 individuals who have transcended the Saint grade. At that point, we may not be unable to fight the heavenly evil god." The other 4 members' spirits immediately lifted, and they asked urgently, "Who is it? Lord Xun'er? Or the Azure-robed Sword Saint? Or perhaps the Supreme Divine Beast?" The captain shook his head and lowered his voice mysteriously. "I've heard it's someone from Mu Manor." "Mu Manor? Could it be the master of Mu Manor, Lord Mu Chen?" The 4 of them exclaimed in shock, and then immediately felt disbelief. After all, in recent years, Mu Chen had vanished without a trace, and no news had reached the outside world. So, the impression the Great Thousand Worlds had of him was still stuck on the time when he fought against Moku on the Maha continent. At that time, Mu Chen was only an immortal grade Heavenly Supreme. Even though he had the strength to fight against Saint grade experts, there was still a gap between him and figures like Qin Tian, who had been renowned for years and had reached the later stages of Saint grade. So, the fact that the 3rd person attempting to break into the rankings was actually him left the 4 squad members stunned. This matter was approved by the Flame Emperor and the Martial Ancestor. Even they recognized it, so you shouldn't be making guesses here. When it comes to vision, I believe you can't match up to those two, right? The captain chuckled. The 4 squad members exchanged awkward smiles, feeling slightly relieved. After all, in these years, the reputation of the Flame Emperor and the Martial Ancestor in the Great Thousand Worlds had reached its peak. If it weren't for the two of them, the Great Thousand Worlds would have collapsed in chaos long before the extraterritorial evil clan even attacked. After finishing his words, the captain didn't bother with them any further. He stood up, intending to continue monitoring. Suddenly, his expression shifted, and he raised his head, his face changing drastically. He saw countless black meteors, glowing with destructive light, descending from the sky. A torrent of demonic energy followed. Boom! Countless meteor-like streaks of light landed heavily on the ground, and the shockwave destroyed the entire mountain range. Fall back! The captain's face was filled with terror as he shouted fiercely. The extraterritorial evil clan has appeared. The squad members' faces turned pale, and without hesitation, they turned into streaks of light and shot away. They needed to relay this news immediately. Where do you think you're going? However, just as they moved, a cold and eerie voice rang out. Space twisted, and a shadowy demon claw materialized out of nowhere, grabbing all 4 squad members in its grasp. Bang! Before they could resist, the demon claw tightened, and space erupted, sending blood spraying into the air. The captain, witnessing this scene, felt as if his eyes were about to burst with rage. But he could feel the terrifying power of the one who made the move. It was undoubtedly a demon emperor. He didn't dare linger and immediately turned into countless afterimages, shooting away at full speed. However, his escape was short-lived, as a demonic figure slowly materialized in front of him, its cruel eyes fixed on him, and a vast demonic aura radiating out. You think you can escape? The demonic figure sneered sharply. The captain's face turned pale. Facing a demon emperor with strength comparable to a heavenly supreme, he knew there was no way out. So, after taking a deep breath, his expression gradually became calm, and a look of determination appeared in his eyes. Heaven protect the Great Thousand. The captain muttered to himself, and the next moment, he charged directly at the demon emperor. An ant trying to stop a cart. The demon emperor's lips curled into a cruel smile as he raised his hand, ready to crush the captain with a single strike. Boom. But at that very moment, numerous spiritual energy patterns suddenly appeared on the captain's body. The violent spiritual energy erupted from him like a tidal wave. The demon emperor's expression changed drastically. Boom. Boom. The captain's body exploded in that instant, erupting like a massive sun, and the wild fluctuations of spiritual energy ravaged the world. The violent spiritual energy raged on for a long while before it slowly dissipated. The demonic figure revealed itself, looking somewhat disheveled. His face was ashen, clearly not expecting the person before him to choose such a decisive self-detonation. Humph, you really made me go easy on you. The demon emperor sneered coldly, waving his sleeve as his figure gradually faded away. At the same time, countless streaks of demonic light flickered across the land, and demonic figures spread out like a storm, rushing toward the distance. On the edge of the Great Thousand Worlds, a towering city stood in mid-air, radiating millions of spiritual lights, illuminating the vast expanse below. Under the glow of this light, countless beings of the Great Thousand Worlds felt a sense of peace. At this moment, in the heart of this fortress-like city, both the Flame Emperor and the Martial Ancestor opened their slightly closed eyes. A cold glint flashed in their gazes, as they had both sensed an unusual fluctuation in spiritual energy, a fluctuation that could only come from a self-detonation. Clearly, a reconnaissance team had encountered an accident. Finally, it's here. They exchanged a glance, then with a wave of their sleeves, a resonant ancient bell sound echoed through the void. The sound was incredibly powerful, its sonic waves spreading and reverberating throughout every corner of the Great Thousand Worlds. The bell tolled 9 times, signaling the arrival of the highest level of crisis. At the moment the bell rang, all the beings across the Great Thousand Worlds looked up, their gazes fixed on the direction of the world's boundary. They knew that the counterattack of the extraterritorial evil clan had begun. When the extraterritorial evil clan reappeared in the sight of the beings of the Great Thousand Worlds, the flames of war descended, igniting the long defense line at the boundary of the Great Thousand Worlds. Blood and fire shattered the peace that had lasted for 49,000 years in the Great Thousand Worlds. As if venting the rage built up from the suppression of the Great Thousand Worlds, the counterattack of the extraterritorial evil clan was ferocious and reckless. The demonic shadows, like locusts sweeping through, roared across the sky, the demonic aura rising to the heavens as if trying to reshape the world. Faced with the invasion of the extraterritorial evil clan, the Great Thousand Worlds, which had been preparing for years, erupted into a violent counterattack after a brief period of silence. Along the vast defense line, every point erupted into brutal battles. Demonic shadows howled, and flashes of spiritual light appeared, as if a grand fireworks display was unfolding across the world. However, these brilliant fireworks were forged in blood. Beyond layers of imposing defenses, a towering city floated in the sky, its spiritual light spreading and enveloping the defenses. Under the radiance of this light, the spiritual energy recovery speed of all the beings in the Great Thousand Worlds was greatly accelerated. This city, like a fortress, was now the headquarters of the Great Thousand Worlds Alliance. The Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor personally commanded from here, overseeing the front lines and preparing for the arrival of the heavenly evil god. The spiritual light emanating from around the city was the effect of a Grandmaster-level spirit array, named the Radiant Spirit Heavenly Array. It had been arranged by Qing Yanjing and many other spirit array Grandmasters. Within the array's reach, not only did the beings of the Great Thousand Worlds experience accelerated spiritual recovery, but their strength was also enhanced, making it a powerful weapon in the war. It was thanks to this massive array that the defenses ahead were able to withstand the repeated assaults of the extraterritorial evil clan. At the highest point of the city stood a grand hall, where many figures stood in solemn formation, each exuding powerful spiritual energy fluctuations. At the foremost position in the hall were two thrones side by side. The Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor sat sternly on them. In the present Great Thousand Worlds, they were essentially the leaders, a position that even Qin Tian, the Lord of the Palace of the Great Thousand, did not dispute. Inside the hall, Qin Tian, azure-robed sword saint, true dragon emperor, Moku, Qing Yanjing, and the elders and clan leaders of the 5 great ancient clans had all gathered. Even some ancient, once reclusive figures were present. At this moment, the hall was undoubtedly filled with the greatest power in the Great Thousand Worlds. The atmosphere in the hall was heavy, and every person's expression was grave, their bodies tense as their spiritual energy surged. The Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor exchanged a look, and the former slowly spoke. "You all are aware, the counterattack of the extraterritorial evil clan has begun. Our war for the survival of the Great Thousand Worlds has already begun." At these words, every powerful figure in the hall narrowed their eyes, and a cold, murderous aura began to permeate the air. "Flame Emperor, Martial Ancestor, please give the order. We, the Great Thousand Worlds, are ready to fight to the death with the extraterritorial evil clan." Qin Tian cupped his fists and spoke with a deep voice. All others also showed fierce determination in their eyes. This was a war that could not be avoided. To protect their sects, families, and friends, they had no choice but to face the extraterritorial evil clan in battle. The Flame Emperor slowly nodded, and his deep, killing voice rang out in the hall. "Listen up, everyone. From now on, each of you will lead your forces to the front lines. Every continent at the front must have a Saint-grade late-stage expert station to guard against the heavenly demon emperor of the extraterritorial evil clan." "Yes." Qin Tian and the other Saint-grade late-stage experts responded in unison. The extraterritorial evil clan has taken control of many lower dimensions. These lower realms may connect to the Great Thousand Worlds, so we will form an inspection guard to patrol the rear. If any extraterritorial evil clan forces are discovered entering, they must be wiped out immediately. "Yes." The roar of agreement echoed through the hall. Martial Ancestor then looked at the others and spoke steadily. "The Flame Emperor and I will remain here to command. This time, we will not be able to intervene directly in the war. Whether or not we can stabilize the situation will depend on you." "Martial Ancestor, why is this?" a powerful figure asked in confusion. Without the presence of both the Flame Emperor and the Martial Ancestor, the battle would undoubtedly become deadlocked. The Flame Emperor raised his head, his eyes burning with fire. His gaze seemed to pierce through the void, as if seeing an unknown place. That heavenly evil god has already subtly locked onto us. We must stay vigilant and keep a close watch on him. Though the heavenly evil god had yet to appear, at their level, even the distant presence of such power would be beyond the endurance of ordinary Saint-grade experts. As a result, Both sides maintained an unspoken agreement and refrained from taking action. Hearing this, everyone felt a chill run down their spines, as if they too were being locked onto by that evil gaze from the void. Flame Emperor, martial ancestor, rest assured. The Great Thousand Worlds is where all of us live. To protect this world, we are equally willing to fight, many heavenly supremes solemnly declared. Under the immense external pressure from the extraterritorial evil clan, all the forces of the Great Thousand Worlds had united. The previous grudges had been suppressed for the sake of this greater cause. Currently, the greatest enemy of the Great Thousand Worlds was the extraterritorial evil clan. On one side of the Great Hall, several graceful figures stood. Their beauty was beyond compare, each radiating a unique aura, yet all were as captivating as the full moon. The four of them were naturally the four matriarchs of the Endless Fire domain, from the martial realm. This scene feels oddly familiar, Ling Qingzhu remarked, her beautiful eyes gazing at the hall filled with a murderous atmosphere. She sighed. Back in their homeland, it was once just like this. Standing beside Ling Qingzhu, Ying Huanhuan's ice-blue hair cascaded down. Her eyes were filled with boundless cold energy, and her appearance remained unchanged from the time when she fought the alien demon emperor in the chaotic demon sea. She looked exactly the same as she did back then. However, now, their opponents were no longer the alien demon clan, but the even more terrifying extraterritorial evil clan. Back then, we drove the alien demon clan away, and this time, we will also drive the extraterritorial evil clan out of the Great Thousand Worlds, Ling Qingzhu said, nodding slightly. She then flashed a teasing smile at Ying Huanhuan and said, but this time, you won't have to make such a big sacrifice. Otherwise, where would Lin Dong go to find you again? Ying Huanhuan's face flushed slightly, especially when the two matriarchs of the Endless Fire domain smiled at her. She could only roll her eyes at Ling Qingzhu. Mother, shouldn't we do something as well? A sweet voice suddenly interjected. Behind the matriarch of the Endless Fire domain, Kai Lin, a slender and delicate girl with an enchanting appearance, turned her gaze toward them. It was Xiao Xiao. Yes, we should do something. We can't keep hiding here. As soon as Xiao Xiao finished speaking, another clear voice chimed in. Lin Jing, with her hands raised in agreement, looked at her two mothers with eager eyes. The four matriarchs exchanged helpless glances. Then, Xiao Xun'er smiled faintly and said softly, don't worry. I've already discussed this with your father. From now on, you two will join Luo Li and form a team to join the inspection guard. You will maintain stability in the rear. If you find any extraterritorial evil clan infiltrators, you must eliminate them immediately. Lin Jing blinked her clear, beautiful eyes and said with some disappointment, huh? Maintain stability in the rear? I've already reached Heavenly Supreme. I should be on the front lines. Ling Qingzhu rolled her eyes at her, then replied seriously, maintaining stability in the rear is also extremely important. Right now, most of the Heavenly Supremes from the Great Thousand Worlds have already gone to the front lines. We must ensure the safety of their sects, families, and friends. Seeing her mother's serious expression, Lin Jing pouted slightly and said no more. Xiao Xiao nodded as well. The four matriarchs exchanged a look of relief, silently relieved. Even though the battle at the front lines was crucial to the survival of the Great Thousand Worlds, and Heavenly Supremes could fall at any moment, these two young ones were still inexperienced. Sending them to the front lines would undoubtedly be far too dangerous. It was much safer to place them in the rear to maintain stability. Though this battle was one that concerned the fate of the Great Thousand Worlds, and they would rather personally go to the front lines to confront the enemy, as mothers, they wanted to spare their children as much danger as possible. For that, they were willing to take their place. By the way, Mother, where has Mu Chen gone? There's been no news of him these past few years, which is very unlike him. Lin Jing's eyes continuously scanned the Grand Hall. In a situation like this, with Mu Chen's reputation, it would be impossible for him to be absent. Moreover, that guy was no stranger to stirring up trouble, so his sudden disappearance over these years was truly unbelievable. Upon hearing Lin Jing's question, Xiao Xiao also cast her gaze over, clearly concerned about news of this friend. However, only a very few people knew anything about Mu Chen's whereabouts, and even the occasional rumors could not be fully trusted. The four matriarchs' faces also grew solemn upon hearing the question. They were far more aware of the exact situation, and thus, they understood just how crucial Mu Chen was to this impending calamity. Don't worry. When he reappears, the entire Great Thousand Worlds will be shaken with joy. We all hope that he will succeed. After issuing the mobilization orders, the Flame Emperor and martial ancestors stood up. Their solemn gazes swept across everyone in the hall, and their deep voices echoed out. The extraterritorial evil clan wants to occupy our land of survival, and we will tell them that the only thing awaiting them is swords and blades, blood and fire. The flames of war burned, bringing chaos. Life and death played out over layer after layer of long defenses. In just 1 month, the boundaries of the Great Thousand Worlds seemed to have turned into a massive meat grinder, with countless powerful warriors from both sides charging forward like locusts. Yet, even the Heavenly Supreme, in a war of this scale, appeared quite vulnerable. Almost every day, both sides saw the fall of Heavenly Supremes and Demon Emperors. War was exceedingly brutal. However, neither side had any intention of stopping, for the two were fundamentally irreconcilable. One side sought to occupy the Great Thousand Worlds as its place of survival, while the other sought to defend its own world. As such, only one side could survive. While the frontline battle grew ever fiercer within the Great Thousand Worlds, there was no escape from the turmoil, no chance to enjoy peace. Outside the void of a continent within the Great Thousand Worlds, the nothingness suddenly tore open. Vast demonic aura poured out like a signal of smoke, followed by the chilling sound of demonic howls reverberating through the heavens and earth. Countless demonic figures surged forth like a storm. Boom, boom. At the moment these demonic figures appeared, the continent was shaken by countless mournful bell tolls. Immediately afterward, numerous beams of light shot into the sky, their gazes filled with terror as they looked at the suddenly appearing demonic horde. Kill them. Turn the Great Thousand Worlds into a river of blood. A cruel demonic howl echoed, and like locusts, the demonic figures descended in waves. Block them. Signal for reinforcements. The continent echoed with urgent cries as its powerful warriors surged upward, their immense spiritual energy sweeping over the land. In this moment, many factions on the continent put aside past grudges and united to face the enemy. Boom, boom. The two sides collided with immense force, and violent shockwaves exploded in every direction. The entire continent was thrown into chaos. At the same time, in the Great Thousand Worlds, cracks in space were torn open, and large numbers of the extraterritorial evil clan swarmed through, attempting to use this method to sow further discord. Thus, the Great Thousand Worlds was also set ablaze with the fires of war. As the extraterritorial evil clan infiltrated the Great Thousand Worlds, within a towering palace, many figures stood, exuding immense spiritual power. Everyone's faces were grim as they gazed at the shimmering light screen in the air, which showed continents ravaged by the extraterritorial evil clan. Inspection Guard, listen up. Form a team to clear the rear. At the forefront of the hall, two figures stood with solemn expressions. The leader was an elderly man with white hair, while the other was a handsome, almost demonic-looking young man. Their sharp gazes swept over the crowd. Though the people present were all top-tier experts from various places within the Great Thousand Worlds, none of them showed any signs of dissatisfaction. These two were none other than Chen and Lindiao, now the leaders of the Inspection Guard, tasked with stabilizing the rear and ensuring that the frontline forces could focus on battling the enemy. Team 1, led by the Western Battle Emperor, will head to the southwest. In the Grand Hall, the Western Battle Emperor, with a solemn expression, clasped his hands and said, "Understood." Team 2. Team 3. Teams quickly assembled under the orders of Chen and Lindiao, gathering their forces and immediately heading toward the areas ravaged by the extraterritorial evil clan through the teleportation spirit array, moving with incredible speed. Team 30. Chen's gaze turned toward the three familiar, graceful figures gathered together inside the Great Hall. With a deep voice, he commanded, "Luo Li will be the captain, with Xiao Xiao and Lin Jing as vice-captains. Gather the team and head to the northwest to exterminate the demons." Yes. Luo Li, holding a sword with her jade-like hands, her exquisite face glowing with radiance, spoke in a clear voice, drawing the attention of many strong individuals in the hall, who cast sidelong glances with a look of admiration. After all, such an outstanding girl was truly a sight to behold. Unfortunately, she was already taken. Xiao Xiao and Lin Jing both clasped their fists and accepted the command, their eyes sparkling with eagerness, clearly unable to contain themselves any longer. Without wasting a moment, the three women gathered over 100 strong individuals and immediately set off toward the region plagued by the demon disaster. They too would personally engage in battle. When the team led by Luo Li arrived on a war-torn continent, the sound of battle was deafening, with demon shadows wreaking havoc, continuously assaulting cities, and the air thick with the stench of blood. The extraterritorial evil clan here is led by 3 demon emperors. Luo Li scanned the battlefield, quickly identifying the strongest among the invading demons. She turned to Lin Jing and Xiao Xiao and said, "We'll handle these 3 demon emperors. The rest of you, go assist the other cities." "Understood." Lin Jing nodded eagerly, while a cold glint flashed across Xiao Xiao's bewitching face. "Yes," the rest of the team responded in unison. "Let's move." At Luo Li's command, over 100 streaks of light shot out, and Luo Li's figure vanished in a flash, cutting through the air. In just a few short minutes, she had locked onto the strongest demon emperor on the continent. This demon emperor was a profound demon emperor, with strength comparable to that of an immortal grade heavenly supreme. With his power, he was nearly invincible on this continent, which was why the great Thousand World's strongest had fallen so quickly under his leadership. However, the profound demon emperor's luck had run out, for as soon as Luo Li locked onto him, he felt an indescribable sense of danger descending upon him. Without hesitation, he shot into the sky, attempting to escape. Whoosh! But as soon as he took off, the sky above him began to warp, and an ancient scroll slowly appeared, enveloping the area with spiritual light as though sealing the space itself. The demonic aura coalesced, and the profound demon emperor emerged, his face dark as he stared at the barrier of spiritual energy above him. He sensed a dangerous fluctuation from the shield. "Did you think you could stir up such chaos and just leave?" A cold, composed voice rang out, rippling through the air. Luo Li's figure materialized, her gaze looking down at the profound demon emperor from above. "Heh, what a beautiful girl. Let's see how I'll capture you and ravage you." The profound demon emperor's eyes gleamed with a lecherous light as he looked at Luo Li's delicate figure, his face turning vicious. Though the ancient scroll made him feel a deep sense of danger, the girl before him didn't seem that strong. As long as he captured her, he could escape. Swish! The profound demon emperor shot forward in a blur, transforming into countless demon shadows. With a slap of his palm, a thick torrent of demonic energy howled out, wrapping toward Luo Li. However, Luo Li didn't even flinch. She didn't even shift her gaze, simply flicking her slender, jade-like finger. Buzz! The tiling ancient scroll trembled, and in the next moment, a beam of light descended. It was not dazzling, but it had one defining feature, an overwhelming, incomprehensible power of spiritual energy. The sheer magnitude of the spiritual energy was so intense that even the profound demon emperor felt his scalp tingling, his face filled with shock. Boom! The spiritual light struck the profound demon emperor's body, and he roared, unleashing a torrent of demonic energy to resist. But the might of the tiling ancient scroll was unmatched, similar to the tiling ancient body, containing nearly endless spiritual energy. His resistance lasted for a few minutes before he let out a dreadful, desperate howl. The light from the heavens poured down, and the profound demon emperor's body disintegrated into the vast expanse of nothingness under the overwhelming spiritual energy. In midair, Luo Li's beautiful eyes calmly watched the scene unfold. The tiling ancient scroll contained boundless spiritual power, making it a tremendous challenge even for early-stage saint-grade experts. How could a profound demon emperor possibly stop it? Below, with the fall of the profound demon emperor, the top-tier members of the extraterritorial evil clan were also horrified, quickly fleeing in panic. Meanwhile, the great Thousand Worlds experts trapped in the city seized the opportunity, surging out to give chase. Watching the shifting situation, Luo Li let out a slight sigh of relief. Her gaze turned to another direction, where a massive spiritual energy fluctuation erupted. Clearly, Lin Jing and Xiao Xiao were also engaged in battle with 2 other demon emperors. The suppression of the demon calamity lasted only half a day before it ended. The top experts of the extraterritorial evil clan were slain, and the remaining ones were easy pickings for the continent's strongest. After stabilizing the situation, Luo Li simply waved to the incoming experts and, without delay, led her team toward other continents ravaged by the demon calamity. Over the next half-month, Luo Li, Lin Jing, and Xiao Zhao's team became like firefighters, constantly rushing from battlefield to battlefield, eradicating the demon calamities. Through their relentless efforts, the calamities were gradually extinguished. However, each time one area was cleared, new outbreaks would emerge elsewhere. On the Wind Shadow continent, the entire land was covered in ruins, with even the mountains crumbling, presenting a doomsday-like scene. On a high mountain, Luoli stood against the wind. Her beautiful eyes surveyed the desolate land, her face cold as ice. The demon calamity on this continent was especially severe. When they arrived, the land was already littered with corpses, and the casualties were devastating. Even with their arrival, it took immense effort to suppress the calamity. "Captain, all the extraterritorial evil clan members have been driven out," a voice came from behind. Lin Jing and Xiao Xiao hurried toward her. The two women, especially Lin Jing, had undergone the most significant changes in the past half-month. Her bright eyes now held less innocence and more a sense of cold decisiveness. After all, in just over half a month, the demon emperors who had fallen at their hands exceeded the number of fingers on both hands. "Well done," Luo Li turned around and lightly nodded at them. After over half a month of constant travel, even she was starting to feel exhausted, and Xiao Xiao and Lin Jing looked particularly worn out. "Do you need a break?" Hearing Luo Li's words, Xiao Xiao shook her head. Looking at Luo Li, she softly said, "We probably don't have the time." "Why? Is there another demon calamity?" Lin Jing nodded. "Where?" Luo Li furrowed her brows, but quickly steeled herself and asked in a low voice. Xiao Xiao and Lin Jing exchanged a glance before answering. "In the North Song continent. They say the demon calamity there has reached the highest level and is extremely dangerous." North Song continent. Luo Li froze for a moment. Her beautiful eyes suddenly narrowed, and her jade hand clenched into a fist, her face turning icy. "This is